the Oklahoma offense, I'm going to go back to a comment that I saw in the chat. It was either last week or the week before, and it stuck in my mind, obviously, if I'm bringing it up now, that Oklahoma under Lincoln Riley has declined a little bit each year. And I ran through that thinking, okay, 2017, 18, 19 on through, and thinking, okay, that's not necessarily something you can define and say there's no question they've declined. They still came within a whisker of a college football playoff appearance last year, at least going to the Big 12 championship game to play for one. But I think the argument could be made that on the offensive side of the ball, that there has been a slow decline under Lincoln Riley since a very prolific 2017 with, of course, a veteran quarterback, then a tremendous NFL quarterback, followed up Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray. Certainly the offense was top 2 or 3 in the country, both in yardage per game and points per game during that run, and now slipped to 18th in points, or I'm sorry, 18th in total offense and 8th in scoring offense this past season. So I know you've been reviewing the numbers and the trends and kind of coming up with your own take on that.
Yeah, it's very interesting, Mark. I think Oklahoma's a little bit spoiled. I think just in terms of how good the offense has been over the last 5 years. To your point, but just doing a little bit of research and kind of looking at that. When you look at their best year, just kind of from a points per game perspective, was 2018. They averaged 48.4 points per game that year, 571 yards per game total offense. They were a little bit better in 2017 in terms of total offense. They had 580, just a little bit down in terms. I mean, I say down 3 points below at 45 points per game. So when you look at that from a total yardage per game, and I know you probably take more into the points perspective than you do yards. When you look at where Oklahoma was, as I mentioned, 2017, 580 yards per game, they slipped to 452 this year per game. Now, when you say that, yes, Oklahoma's still top 15, top 20 offense, top 10 in scoring. But when you look at that, 130, almost 140 yards per game decline. Oklahoma was below 40 points per game for the first time under Lincoln Riley. First time since 2014, they averaged 39.1 points per game. So there has been a little bit of a decline. We've talked about this overall from a macro level, Mark, in terms of in-year results going from Oklahoma in 2017, the overtime loss to Georgia, then the loss by 11 points to Alabama in 2018, then the 35-point loss to LSU in 2019. 2020 don't make the playoffs. They have the Cotton Bowl win, and then last year don't make the playoffs, nor do they win the Big 12 championship game. So that steady decline, there's a lot of reasons I think behind that, right, Mark? I mean, I think last year you could kind of point to a little bit of maybe the influx with the coaching situation at the later part of the year, a little bit of more inexperience at the quarterback position than they've had in the past, with with Caleb Williams playing as a true freshman for the last half of the year. But I think one of the things that has come to the forefront is the offensive line just hasn't been as good the last few years. So and that's why I think you talk to anyone, and I think they're probably the pivotal point for Oklahoma this year, at least on the offensive side of the ball, is improved play on that offensive line. But like I said, Oklahoma's been a little bit spoiled in terms of how good their offenses have been. Since for a long time, right? I mean, not necessarily just since Lincoln Riley came aboard, but since Bob Stoops has been here, they've probably had a top 20, 25 offense way more times than they haven't had. So I think I think that's a very interesting trend to see what that looks like here in 2022 with a new regime, so to speak. On the offensive side of the ball, different attack. I mean, obviously they've just got a lot of the same coaching staff that they had in the past, minus Jeff Levy and incorporating that new offense. But you look at this team, Mark, they're going to have a lot of new faces all across the board on the offensive side of the ball. From quarterback, you lose Spencer Rattler and Caleb Williams. You insert Dylan Gabriel at the running back position. You lose Kennedy Brooks, who was one of the better running backs that Oklahoma has had, just in terms of his vision, his, just he's probably not the most athletic guy that OU has even had this year, but a guy that knows how to find the hole. He knows he has really incredible vision. And then wide receivers, you got a lot of just kind of looking at that. You've got a lot of kids that have moved on. So I think that this will be a really big year for Oklahoma offensively to see if they can kind of start bucking that trend a little bit from from where they were. And it's not a huge decline, but I think it's enough for people to notice that hey, there's been a little bit of a decline in Oklahoma's offensive productivity over the last few years, especially when they could go up against a really good defense. Oklahoma really struggled against Baylor. Last year they struggled a little bit against Iowa State offensively last year, which obviously is not one of the better defenses in the country, but absolutely Baylor is. It was last year, so I think that'll be interesting. The one thing that you like if you're Oklahoma is Levy has some SEC proven success, right, at Ole Miss over the last couple of years. You got to think that the talent that Oklahoma has is on par with what Ole Miss has had over the last couple of years as well. So I think coming into that's why it's going to be such a big, and interesting spring for Oklahoma on all sides of the ball, but particularly offenses. The new. Putting in everything new to see how those players react and how quickly they can learn that system.